Hey folks, salam alaikum. So I'm making this video to address a couple of topics. One that takes less time and one that takes more time. Anyway, I recently put a video up on YouTube that had to do with the Navajo Nation Pride procession or parade or float, whatever you want to call it. Basically, where a bunch of vehicles were decorated up with like trans pride flags, rainbow flags, various Two-Spirit LGBTQ displays, and there was a whole procession that went all the way, to the I think it's the Veterans Memorial Park is what it was called. But anyway, from point A to point B, and so I decided to film it from the beginning to the end, and just stick it up on YouTube, basically. So I got a couple of comments. One that was a bigoted comment. Those don't surprise me. Someone says, "Oh, something like it's 2023 and we have Sodom and Gomorrah, or something. This is the modern day Sodom and Gomorrah." So you had, that was a queerphobic, transphobic, homophobic bigot, right? And then you had the other comment, and this is one I want to expand on a little bit, that I felt was kind of microaggressive. And this guy says, and this was a white guy, he had his picture up there. Both of these people didn't have any videos they ever uploaded to YouTube, but whatever. His comment was, "Very nice, but I hope you're gonna also celebrate the 4th of July." Or some minor variation of that statement. That's basically what he said, was very nice, but I sure hope you're going to celebrate the 4th of July. Well, I'm here to tell you all that no, I'm not going to celebrate the 4th of July, and I'm going to expand on this and explain absolutely why I won't celebrate the 4th of July and why I don't believe anybody should be celebrating it. But first, let me expand on his comment. So why is it microaggressive or problematic? Okay, well, first of all, this video is totally the context of an indigenous-led, organized, and participated in Pride event, right? On, for the Diné Nation or Navajo Nation. And, this land is not the United States, right? It's been commonly termed Turtle Island. And the Navajo or Diné people, as well as like all tribal nations and communities and peoples, have been on these lands long before the so-called United States was here, and long before, Christopher Columbus and his crew invaded on ships, right? And so the way this comes across to me is this white man feels threatened somehow. I guess that I, as a non-Indigenous person, would show up to an Indigenous event and support it, or uncomfortable somehow that there even is an Indigenous event, because he has to take something that is not his and center it on settler bullshit. That's basically what it is. 4th of July is a holiday that celebrates settler colonialism. It's a settler colonial holiday. So it's like, oh, well, if you're going to support, a tribal community or a tribal nation or indigenous people, well, you better make sure you support America now. You better make sure you support the United States. That's how it came across. And it's absolute crap. So let me expand now on the whole 4th of July thing. So my question to basically everyone is, why do you all support the 4th of July? Because I find that most Americans are brainwashed. Or a lot of Americans know the history, and not just the history, but all of the oppression that goes on today. They know, they know the truth of everything. But somehow, for some reason, despite the fact that they know the truth, they still have to go through the motions of flag waving every year. And it's like, I question, it's like, are people doing this as a routine because, like, if they don't, they feel like they're going to get chewed out or belittled or confronted or isolated, ostracized, or whatever? I mean, there is this thing that, for a country that constantly claims to be all about freedom and all about the freedom, I say it like this because it's a joke, but all about the freedom for people to supposedly be individuals and do whatever they want and to be allowed to go against the grain of society, etc., etc. The reality is, on the ground, people are very conformist. They do whatever the TV says. They do whatever everybody else they know is doing. They do what's popular. So even though people seem to know the history and the truth, people are just waving these fucking flags around, and it makes no sense to me. So let's talk about why it makes no sense. And this should be obvious stuff to a lot of people, but it isn't, unfortunately. So first of all, the history of this country this is a settler colony built on stolen land. Literally built through the genocide of millions of indigenous peoples from one coast to the other. There's nothing, I don't care what type of propaganda people want to listen to. There was nothing just about it. There was nothing peaceful about it. There's no legitimacy to it. It's literally from 1492 onward, white colonizers from Europe came onto these lands with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other and just started killing. Okay? And then on top of that, you had these white colonists also coming over in massive, just ship after ship after ship endlessly, filled with black people they kidnapped from Africa and enslaved on the ships, and then, on these lands once they got here. Kept them under cruel, inhumane conditions on the ships as well as on the plantations. Violated all their rights, were violent and abusive to them, and killed many of them. And centuries of this was going on, centuries of slavery. This month is Pride Month, and we've been celebrating Pride, this month was also Juneteenth. Juneteenth happened this month. And so it's like, we gotta understand here that, and this history, this isn't something people can just say, oh, it was a long time ago. It doesn't matter. Has this country and its people, especially the people with privilege, the colonizers, the white people, have they learned from this history? I would say most have not. And not only have most not, most don't want to learn. And most don't even want to try. Most don't even want to educate themselves. They'll read a few things here and there, say, I'm not racist, and then forget about it. They're not going to actively be anti-racist or actively anti-colonial. They're not. Not the majority. And further, a lot of marginalized people in this country, including people of color, sadly have been conditioned for for centuries, that the Western way is the right way, the American way is the right way, the colonizer way, the white way is the right way. And that goes back to the whole concept of assimilation, right? That supposedly all these different groups of marginalized people, black, brown, and indigenous, as well as trans and queer people, Jews, Muslims, and so forth, are all supposed to assimilate into what? Into, America, which basically means assimilate into whiteness, assimilate into white supremacy. So it's like, I'm obviously against all of this stuff, okay? We should be actively anti-colonial and confronting all this bullshit everywhere from the macro to the micro level. So, first of all, the oppression never stopped. The U.S. still is horrible to indigenous people, is still horrible to black people. The U.S. doesn't do shit about missing and murdered indigenous women, two-spirit men, and so forth. The U.S. is constantly behind resource colonialism on indigenous lands. And when I say indigenous lands, I mean both on reservations and off reservations, because it's all indigenous land. All of Turtle Island is indigenous land, whether it's on or off a reservation. So they're still extracting copper, lithium, all these resources violently against the wishes and consent. That's the key word here. Against the consent of indigenous peoples of those lands. It's colonization that's still happening. And and so why are we waving a flag? Like, I mean, this is what we're celebrating is the colonization of America, or the colonization of Turtle Island, and we're supposed to wave a flag continuing to celebrate this? But that's ridiculous. And I personally will not participate in it. And then, like, again, look at what this country has done and is still doing to black folks. Look at the prison system. Was slavery ever really abolished in 1865? No. It just was restricted to only being allowed in the prison system if somebody was convicted of a felony and sentenced to prison. So it's still legal right now, just only within the prison. And of course, getting convicted of a felony, right? You lose rights. Even after you're out of prison, and it's the whole, like, it's very dehumanizing the way a convicted felon is treated versus somebody that's not been convicted of a felony. So slavery still very much exists. And examples of this are like firefighters fighting forest fires in California for $1 an hour. You got more locally in the so-called Phoenix area, you have prisoners not fighting, but working at this egg factory called Hickman's in Tonopah, just outside of Phoenix, which is horrible. I mean, Hickman's, I eat eggs even though I'm a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan, but Hickman's is absolutely just horrible to the animals, and unsurprisingly, they're absolutely horrible to the people that work for them for probably, I don't know, anywhere from 15 cents to maybe $1 an hour. And there's been, I've heard a lot of different reports about how bad the prisoners are treated there, the experiences they have there, and so forth. So this stuff is still going on today. Absolutely. And, what? George Floyd's murder was, 3 years ago? Like, all of this oppression is still happening, right? And then you have immigration, right? Or, as I will also say, so-called immigration. Because back in the day, before America invaded with a Bible and a gun, or rather before white colonizers invaded and made this place a state, and drew up borders after, killing people by the millions, now there's this wall along the U.S.-Mexico so-called border that divides indigenous communities such as the Tohono O'odham and the Hyakchid O'odham. There's this wall and this border on stolen land. So you have white people basically that invaded these lands and decided they're going to draw a line and put a wall up to divide one group of people from another group of people and split up existing groups of people, and then now treat them as separate groups of people. Divide and conquer. And then, start rounding up migrants that come in here without proper paperwork. All this border patrol shit, all this ICE crap, and how many migrants are constantly being held in these ICE camps, including transgender migrants. This country is absolutely horrible to migrants. The way the fence has been set up, the way the enforcement has been set up, is done in such a way to drive migrant travel northward from like Sonora to Arizona. It's designed in such a way to cause these people to take routes that are less likely for them to be seen by these federal forces, but that are far more dangerous from conditions like the heat, lack of water, and so forth, no communications, etc., etc. And this is designed to kill them. It's another form of genocide. And I can go on and on about this stuff. Another thing I want to talk about, speaking of all this flag waving that people do, Um, God, it's hot out here even now. But anyway, let's talk about the military, because one of the excuses or reasons that people will wave the flag is they were a former soldier. They had been enlisted as in one of the divisions of the military. They served their term, served their time. Maybe they were sent overseas. Maybe they fought a war. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just in an office somewhere. But they did their time in the military and they got out. And now they're walking around waving a flag. Sometimes even wearing a uniform and a hat, advertising to everybody that that they're a veteran of the armed forces, and we're all supposed to be like, thank you for your service, and be, respecting this, and it's not respectful. Now, I just want to say here, I'm not going to disparage the soldiers. I'm not going to disrespect people that did serve. Like, a lot of people join when they're young, when they don't necessarily have the knowledge of what the military really represents. And they're also fed a lot of propaganda by the military itself, and by the society itself. And so, just because somebody does something for a few years that's really not worthy of respect, people can live and learn, right? And so there are soldiers that realize, sometimes while they're in the military and sometimes shortly after they get out, that they're like, wow, what I did was wrong. This whole system is wrong. And they'll stand up and they'll speak out against it. There was, for instance, just about a year ago when Roe versus Wade was overturned and there were protests, there was somebody, a trans woman, who was a former soldier in the U.S. military, who was kind of taking the lead in a lot of protests and direct actions and various things. I haven't seen her around for a while, which is kind of concerning. But she was a strong voice in this movement for not only in solidarity for abortion rights, not only for the right to have an abortion, but a range of things. And she spoke out against the military all the time. She spoke out about its role in the world, what it does, the problems with the military, the way soldiers are treated within the military, the toxic masculinity, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I'm just going to say here, for anybody that doesn't know, the military does not fight for our freedom. That's propaganda. They're not, fighting to keep us safe. Okay, they're not. And also part of the military, known as the National Guard, is specifically trained and exists for the purpose of squashing any kind of dissent that happens within the borders of the U.S. So even though most of the military is for outside of the borders, there's that portion of the military that's for inside the borders. So when there's, for instance, an uprising, say because the cops murdered George Floyd, and the cops, are not able to squash the protests that happen within a few days, they send in the military. And the National Guard was basically being sent in 2020, kind of right at the time where the FBI's and other agencies' counterinsurgency measures were able to get the militant kind of uprising squashed. So they didn't really end up having to put a lot of soldiers out on the streets at protests, because it's like two different arms here. You had the law enforcement arm doing their sorry y'all, I just got interrupted. Just somebody walking by, no big deal. But I like doing these videos outdoors, but I don't like doing them around people, because people's brains will short circuit because of the kind of topics I'm addressing. We're not supposed to talk about this stuff, even though we have so-called free speech. We're supposed to, all we're supposed to talk about is the dumb shit on television and consumerism and entertainment and, very mundane topics. So these kinds of topics make people nervous, and I never know if someone's going to start getting angry or lashing out and so forth. But anyway, But anyway, back to where I was. But yeah, so they had the FBI and the police departments doing their counterinsurgency to squash it at the same time. They were getting ready to put the soldiers out. So anyway, you know, how is this about freedom then? You know, we're talking about, oh, well, the military's there to protect our freedom. No, they're literally there to smash our freedom. I mean, and overseas, millions and millions and millions of people have died or directly been killed as a result of the military's policies. In fact, it's estimated 4 million people have died in the last 20 years as a result of the U.S. military, both from direct killings and also in other ways, like because of all the bombings, all the destruction from the war on Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and so forth. People dying from lack of clean water, lack of food, dying possibly from radiation exposure from uranium poisoning and in Iraq and stuff like this. And you know, so like, and they're like, oh well, we were stopping terrorists. Like, I don't think 4 million people are behind terrorism. And like, what is terrorism? I mean, the United States is the number one terrorist nation in the world. I mean, the military has invaded more countries and occupies more countries, the U.S. military does, than any country in the world, and it's done so for at least decades. So the U.S. military, if they're not fighting for our freedom, what are they fighting for? They're fighting for capitalism. They're fighting for resource colonialism. They invade countries, steal the resources, exploit the labor for as cheap as they can for corporations here. They topple other governments and install their own puppet dictators often to control people. And that's what they do. And they've been doing this, for decades and decades and decades. And their very existence, their whole existence has been a violent, oppressive force. What were they originally doing? The military, their original purpose was to attack and destroy indigenous communities on these lands. I mean, before the Bureau of Indian Affairs was created, which is under the Department of the Interior, it was the military. I mean, like, Indian Affairs was under the control of the U.S. military. Research this stuff. So why the fuck are we waving a flag? Like, what's today, the 29th? So in 5 days we're all supposed to wave a flag. Now look, if you're into having a barbecue, setting off some fireworks for some fun, if you want to have family get together or a bunch of your friends get together and just have some fun, again, having dinner, a barbecue, fireworks, jump in a swimming pool, whatever, that's fine. I have no problem with it. I'm not going to participate in anything where there's a bunch of flags being flown. And I don't think anyone else should either. And another form of oppression too, like what does this flag represent? Like, I don't understand what it is that we're celebrating. Like, we're celebrating stolen land, we're celebrating settler colonialism. We're celebrating all this stuff. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then here it is, Pride Month, right? And I said at the beginning about, like, this bigot and this microaggressive person on a YouTube video having to do with an indigenous pride that I attended. They're upset about it, and concerned that I would be involved with it. As long as I support America, you want to support indigenous people, you better support America. Like, fuck that. Let's take a look at what's been going on the last few years. I mean, there are hundreds of anti-2S LGBTQ bills nationwide that have been introduced in legislatures all across the country. A number of them have passed. A lot of these bills they're attacking just about everything, but a lot of the bills are specifically attacking transgender people. A lot of the rhetoric now from the far right, the bigots, they're raging against trans women in particular, and drag queens. They're huge on attacking drag queens, accusing us, and when I say us, I mean, me as a trans woman. I don't do drag. I think most people watching this know that, but I absolutely support my drag sisters and brothers and non-binary folks. They're really attacking us, saying that we're pedophiles, saying that we're grooming. This is very dangerous rhetoric. And I've always known there's been bigotry against the trans and queer community and so forth. I mean, in 1969, the Stonewall riots were literally riots against police violence because police were attacking the queer and trans community, particularly those of color. Same thing's happening now. Anyway, this video's getting long. But, again, why should people like me, or why should like trans or queer, two-spirit, non-binary folks of color, why should any of us be waving a flag right now? Like, this country's not, I mean, we're literally under attack. And the thing that's really been concerning me, and just to make sure it's not just me being paranoid, I've had conversations myself with a lot of other trans people, two-spirit people, non-binary people, and so forth. And everybody's been saying pretty much the same thing, that the way the right wing has been rallying against us, it's gone way beyond, the bigotry has gone way beyond, general disgust, general, let's not talk about these people, let's not talk about this topic, to they just basically want us all killed. Even if most of them aren't outright saying it, the way the rhetoric is coming at us feels very much Nazi Germany-ish. It really does. That they've got to save the children from us. That they've got to protect marriages from us. That they got to protect American values from us. That they got to protect America from us, basically. That we are part of some sort of counterculture that's destroying everything they've known, and that basically we're enemies. We're enemies that have to die. I mean, that's basically the message that's being sent. That's genocidal. It's very, very dangerous. And basically, it's just like, you look at history, right? And they use phrases like the Indian problem or the Jewish question, terms that are very genocidal. And now I'm seeing the transgender controversy. That's the phrase I've seen a number of times, the transgender controversy. It's the same thing. So, anyway, I wanted to make this video because I wanted to talk about it. It's like, it's ridiculous that people are conditioned to wave this flag every year. And of course, you have people take it further where there's a damn flag outside their home day in and day out. I mean, they're wearing the flag. I mean, like what is it we're waving it for? Like, what is this country actually doing for people? I mean, it's killing people. The lack of health care. I mean, I could go on and on. Homelessness everywhere. An absolute militarized police state that's killing all the time. The violence against, again, trans, queer, and two-spirit people. The violence against people of color. Black, brown, and indigenous. Violence against Muslims, violence against Jews. And then on top of that, you have not only this, well, not just cis heteropatriarchy, but within the patriarchy, you've got all this toxic masculinity and misogyny that's on steroids. And I criticize liberals for many things, but one thing to mention specifically is liberals have been making everything about Trump, 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 Trump. That's all I ever hear about from liberals is Trump, Trump, Trump. Trump hasn't been president for over 2 years. Like, it's not about Trump. It's a system. And I said this to people during the Trump years. It's a system. And liberals that have always made everything about Republicans, everything about Trump, don't have a correct understanding, because if you look now under Biden, not only is it much of the same shit that was happening under Trump, but a hell of a lot of it has gotten way worse now under Biden than under Trump. Under Trump, it got way worse than it was under Obama. But it was getting worse under Obama. It was getting worse under Bush. It was getting worse under Clinton, and on and on and on. It's a system. It's a system of oppression. It's not about one party or the other. So I just kind of want to wrap this up by saying, like, stop and think. Like, stop supporting white supremacy, because that's what this country is actually all about. Stop supporting settler and resource colonialism. Stop supporting capitalism that's oppressing everybody and destroying everything. Like, stop supporting imperialism, which the U.S. military is doing. Stop supporting cis heteropatriarchy. Like, stop burning a torch to this system. Like, stop doing it. Anyway, and take a damn stand. Like, it's not that hard to not wave a goddamn flag. And I'm sorry for the language, everybody, but it's ridiculous. Like, you don't, like, it's not that hard to stop burning a torch for this violent, oppressive system. It's not that hard to stop, supporting it. It's like, speak out against injustices. Speak out against this stuff. And educate yourselves. I try to educate myself all the time. I don't know everything. But at least stop burning a torch or waving a flag, just because it's socially acceptable or socially convenient. Like, stand up. Like, take a stand against all these harms and oppressions and violence that the United States has been doing since not just since 1776, but since 1492. Another thing I just want to say, and I guess I'll close with this. Like, 4th of July, 1776, which we're all supposed to be waving flags to, like, oh, it's Independence Day. Independence from what? Oh, they say the British. So basically what it is you have one group of white colonizers fighting another group of white colonizers for land that's not theirs, for land that was never theirs, and for land that will never be theirs. And anyway, I just want to close this also for, like, that idiot that was, questioning me or, like, whatever, saying, well, I hope you're going to support 4th of July if you're going to support this indigenous pride event. It's like, dude, take a step back, sit the fuck down, and shut the fuck up. Anyway, y'all have a good day. Salam alaikum.